The year is 1964. Albert DeSalvo, more commonly known as the Green Man, is arrested for his involvement in the Green Man case. The Marine Force launched into space for the first time in order to take close-up pictures of Mars. But perhaps the most important event to happen that year was the passing of the Civil Rights Act, banning all state and local laws that allowed institutionalized segregation. This marked a monumental win for both the African American rights movements in the US, as well as a win for all rights activists around the world. 3 months later, Martin Luther King receives his Nobel Peace Prize, and for a moment, everything seems to be at peace. Well,
Policy
it
A.
isn't.
Laws made
Segregation in
white
the
people
form of
officially
apartheid was still a major issue for South Africa at the time. In a country where most of the population is African, but the legislature leaves African families largely disadvantaged compared to their white counterparts, it is plain to see that there is a glaring problem with the way the country is run. But this problem was not caused by accident. Instead, it was known as apartheid. It was a political and social system enforced during the primarily white rule of South Africa, where racial discrimination against non-whites was enforced by law. During the 60s, apartheid had already been in effect for almost 20 years, and the people were growing tired of it. Resistance in the form of the anti-apartheid movement was beginning to gain steam, and Africans from all over South Africa were ready to make against the oppression. And with Nelson Mandela, a large anti-apartheid figure in the movement, imprisoned that same year, one man now leads at the heart of the resistance, a hidden figure who worked to unify the fight against apartheid and helped lead to the end of it all. That man is Steve Biko. Steve Biko was born December 18th, the year of 1946 in Tarkasad, South Africa. Only 2 years later, apartheid was passed by the National Party. Biko was an intellectual child, causing his grade school teacher James E. Monaghan to move from Standard 3 to Standard 5. After completing Standard 6 in 1960, Biko attended Forbes Grant. Throughout his 2 years at Forbes Grant, Biko would be an excellent, even outstanding student among his peers and teachers. After completing his terms at Forbes Grant and achieving his junior certificate in 1962, Steve Biko followed his older brother Kaya's footsteps and attended Lovedale College. After only 3 months there, Steve Biko was expelled due to interrogation sparked by Kaya's arrest. Concerned for his brother's education, Kaya desperately sent letters to college until St. Francis College finally accepted Steve Biko in 1964. 2 years later, Biko was admitted into the University of Natal at Wentworth as a medical student. As he was there, he formed the South African Students Organization, or SASO, as a black alternative to the Liberal Nation Union of South African Students, or NUSAS, and was inaugurated as the first president of the organization in 1969. While in SASO, Biko met several white leaders from NUSAS who were willing to help him, like Paula and Soren Forrest Kleinenschmidt. During the 1970 NUSAS Congress, Paula and Soren made an impactful demonstration by sitting on Biko's lap, fully aware of the repercussions he could face under the apartheid law. 2 years later, Biko was expelled from the University of Natal due to his political activism jeopardizing his medical studies. Despite his expulsion from the university, Biko formed the Black People's Convention that same year. Eventually, Biko gave up his medical degree to pursue law and political sciences, which better supports his political aspirations. By March of 1973, at the age of 26, Biko's political activities were proscribed due to his growing popularity. Biko wasn't allowed to leave his hometown, Kings William Town, nor contribute to any of the organizations he helped form. In spite of his tough situation, Biko kept fighting for his dream of an egalitarian society. Biko furtively formed the Zamil Trust Fund and the Ginsberg Educational Trust fell under his ban. In 1975, Biko, along with the BCP, formed the Zen Flow Clinic, the heart of the Black consciousness movement. Activists congregating from all over the country regularly attended this clinic, exchanging ideas concerning the Black consciousness movement. As the movement surged onward, several white commentators had their issues with the movement, including Donald Woods, an editor for the East London-based Daily Dispatch and an honorary president for NUSAS, criticized the Black consciousness movement because of its exclusion of whites. Fed up by Wood's statements, Biko sent Pierre Rambele to meet with him to end the ignorant criticism of the Black consciousness movement. Fortunately, Biko wasn't the only activist in the movement to be proscribed from protesting under the apartheid. All of the first-generation leaders were officially banished from any political activities. This allowed a second generation of Black consciousness movement leaders to emanate. One leader, Muntu Meza, emerged, and his first course of action was to hold rallies in celebration for the transitional government of Firmilio and the eventual independence of Mozambique. Soon after Meza announced the rallies, the South African government banned it altogether. Meza and his stubborn co-workers ignored the demand and decided to hold the rally regardless. Biko warned Meza of the probable retaliation of the South African police, which would put the supporters in danger, but the young, impulsive Meza ignored his advice and held the rallies anyway. The first rally at the Curry's fountain occurred with no visitations from the police. However, the rally at Turfloop University went terribly, with the state incursions of 200 BCM activists and all 13 of the leaders being put on trial. The case, officially named the State v. Cooper, and the 8 others become a focal point for the resistance politics. His first public appearance since his ban in March 1973 was brought forth after he was subpoenaed to the trial. Biko was pressured to take the daunting task of painting the Black consciousness movement as progressive, while preventing notions the state would have used to charge leaders with terrorism or incitement of insurrection. Biko took on the task and delivered a significant testimony that created an international voice for several thousands of Black men and women who were petrified to do so for themselves. In spite of Biko's powerful message, 9 of the 13 leaders were sentenced to 5 to 60 years in prisons at Robben Island. Following the tense trial, Biko continued as the director of the Black Community Programs, which was founded by the Black Consciousness Movement with a study project on Christianity in Apartheid Society. In 1975, without any trial or form of charge, Biko was detained for 137 days. During this time, the BCP held the 4th National Conference. By the start of 1976, Biko's prescription was heavily tightened, resulting in the termination of his time as the director of BCP. Inspired by Biko's testimonies, the youth of Soweto organized a large protest on June 16, 1976. South African police retaliated with armed officers who shot and killed hundreds of students who were running at them. The uprising, dubbed the Soweto Youth Uprising, was revealed by people from all over the world. Not long after, on August 27, 1976, Biko was detained for 101 more days in solitary confinement. In hopes of limiting relations between the Black Consciousness Movement and the exiled organizations, Biko was interrogated and arrested, then released. Due to all the arrests of Black consciousness activists, Steve Biko and Peter Jones began unity talks. Eventually, they decided they should meet with Neve Alexander in Cape Town. At the dawn of August 17, 1977, Biko and Jones went on the journey. Before meeting with Alexander, Biko drove to meet Mikhail Bam, a close friend to Alexander. Jones drove directly to Alexander. After Jones had arrived, he discovered that Alexander would not meet with Biko because both him and Biko were banned by the government. Jones returned to Bam, and Biko warned them of the situation. In spite of warning, Bam decided they should still meet with Alexander. He believed he could persuade him. The group of men arrived at Alexander's, and Bam tirelessly tried to persuade Alexander into meeting with Biko, but his efforts were to no avail. Biko and Jones immediately took on the 12-hour drive, returning to Kings William Town. Unfortunately, the police stopped them before they could arrive. As the police inspected the two of them, the concealed Biko realized he couldn't deny it any longer. Jones and Biko were scattered roughly 9 miles from each other, in Port Elizabeth with Biko in Wilmer Police Station and Jones in Algoa Police Station. The police station stripped and shackled Biko for 20 days before he was conveyed to Salman Building at Port Elizabeth. Biko fought back as he was beaten by Captain Saber because of his refusal to stand up as instructed. A mangled Steve Biko suffered a brain hemorrhage on the nights of September 6th and 7th. A nude, disheveled Steve Biko was taken from Salman Bandung to Pretoria, 700 kilometers away, where a district surgeon tried to tend to his injuries, but it was far too late. Although the anti-apartheid movement had gone so far, its wick was burning out, and the flare it once had was wavering. But after the assassination of Biko, who had been a large player in the anti-apartheid movement thus far, the fight against apartheid exploded with popularity, with Biko as his martyr. The ANC began to use the death of Biko as part of propaganda posters, clamoring for the government to stop killing their people, which was displayed in large font on the posters, as well as the date that Biko had died. The death of Biko was such a large event, in fact, that it also spawned a song by Peter Gabriel named Biko, who was an English singer and songwriter most famous for his song Sledgehammer. The song Biko recalled the events of Biko's assassination in detail, while also talking about the effects of his death on both the anti-apartheid movement and himself. The song was picked up by a multitude of other very talented artists such as Paul Simon of Simon & Garfunkel, Robert White of Soft Machine, and The Simple Minds. Although they tried to silence Biko through his assassination, his death only ended up helping the very thing they sought to abolish. And in 1994, apartheid was finally repealed, marking the first time in almost 50 years that native South Africans and whites could truly be at peace. And as Nelson Mandela, the most widely known anti-apartheid figure, rose to power later that year as the president, the legacy of Steve Biko would always be remembered in the hearts of those who fought beside him. And in the words of Peter Gabriel himself, which I believe truly encapsulates the power of Biko's legacy, you can blow out a candle, but you can't blow out a fire. Once the flames begin to catch, the winds will blow it higher.